Clare Savage, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Now, the Treasurer has made it clear that he is extremely worried about energy prices and the effect that they're going to have on Australian consumers and on inflation. So what role can you play to make sure that people can afford their energy bills?
Right now we have got very high international coal and gas prices, and they are flowing through our electricity market but also our gas markets. So it is really important that consumers have adequate protections. One of the things we do as the Australian Energy Regulator is set the default or the standing offer price so that there is a safety net there for consumers in terms of retail bills. But what we're doing tomorrow is releasing a strategy that actually looks at consumer vulnerability, how it is defined, the experiences that consumers can have, and the different sources of vulnerability, and some really key concrete actions that we can all take to help make that consumer experience better.
Now, the focus of the report is on energy equity. How do you manage a system with all of these price pressures where many low-income families won't be able to pay their energy bills?
What we know right now is there are actually 2.9% of Australian residential energy consumers who already have 90-day debt. So they've had bills outstanding for 90 days. The average amount of that debt is about $1,000. Mm-hmm. By the time a retailer identifies them as needing extra help, so maybe a payment plan or advice on concessions and rebates, they usually have about $1,700 worth of debt.
That's a lot.
And actually a quarter of those customers have debts as much as $2,500.
So for someone with that level of debt, does it become almost unachievable, the idea that you can get on top of it, because the amount that you have to pay back would be crippling to people?
Oh, if you've got $5 or $10 spare a week, the thought of paying back $2,500 worth of energy debt is overwhelming.
So how do you change things when we're actually looking at a situation where prices are going up, not down?
So one of the things our strategy that we're releasing tomorrow focuses on is early identification. That is critical. All the research tells us, and there's quite a few case studies to support this, if you identify customers early, if you believe them, if you give them the right sorts of supports, you actually get them back in the system and paying those bills down rather than defaulting on that energy debt. And that's a really important thing in the face of rising prices.
Now, there's another concern too, which is to what extent the less well-off will be bearing the brunt of the massive energy transition that's taking place in Australia. What can you do to prevent that being the case?
So we know 1/3 of all Australians rent their homes, and that automatically means they don't have control over insulation or choices about upgrading double glazing, for example, all the things you can do to reduce your energy bills. They may also have less access to energy efficient equipment and appliances in their homes. So one of the things we're concerned to make sure is that through that energy transition, there are adequate opportunities and supports in place. We need to protect also consumers not from the energy transition, but to support them through the transition, because low-income housing doesn't often have solar or batteries or some of the more complicated demand response technologies.
So what do you do about that? Because there's clearly plenty of desire amongst people in rented accommodation to be part of the transition and also to clearly have impact on their bills over long term. What can you do to make that more achievable?
So one of the things we have seen governments doing, and the ACT government's a great example of this, they are putting in place measures to actually require landlords to actually upgrade the efficiency of rental properties. But one of the things our strategy is doing is actually looking at whether or not we have the framework or the sort of a fit-for-purpose regulatory framework for the future energy system.
What does that mean in plain speaking? Can you take the ACT example and have it replicated around the country?
So many governments could pick up some of those examples, and energy efficiency is really important as we transition to net zero. But what I'm talking about is actually, so for example, at the moment, you're protected for your energy supply to your home, but you're not protected in the same way if it's a solar panel providing your energy, or if you have an electric vehicle, for example, on a different meter. So looking at the essential nature of energy and how we get the right protections in place is part of the work we're doing.
But as I understand it, in terms of the work that you're doing and the idea that there should be equity in the approach to the way people's bills are managed now, You're talking about transforming the way people deal with energy companies. Are the energy companies on board with this?
We've had really terrific support from the energy companies behind this work. So, even the complexity of our system is a barrier and can actually compound people's experience of vulnerability. So one of the things we are doing is what's called a Better Bills guideline, and so that will actually require retailers to make their bills simpler. So next year when you receive your energy bill, you'll actually be able to look down, and on the front page of it, it will tell you, does your retailer have a better offer for you?
So there are lots of practical things people can do to confront what is going to be a very challenging time for all of us with our bills.
That's right, absolutely.
Clare Savage, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.